So thank you so much, Nilofer, for taking the time out and talking to me. And I've been, an avid follower of your blogs, and I've also gone through the book. So very interesting stuff that you're doing, and it's so great to see that people who are connected to their heritage are actually making the effort to document it and to share it with other people. So thank you so much for all the great work that you're doing. But let's start a line of questions, and of course, then we will have many things to talk about. So first thing first, tell me, Nilofer Afridi Qazi. So you have a part of your name which is Afridi, and then you have a part of your name which is Qazi, and both these references are, they come with a lot of history. So tell us a little bit about that.
Okay. My mother comes from the Afridi clan in the province of KP, from a village called Babri Banda. And my father comes from Balochistan, from a city called Pishin, the Qazis of Balochistan. So I am a big proponent of full disclosure in terms of identity and not erasing or prioritizing a specific part of who you are. And so at age 18, when I went to college, I adopted formally both my identities, and I have ever since been a Afridi Qazi.
Great. So, Nilofer, when did Pakistan on a plate idea came to you, and why did you think it was important to document the culinary history of the regions across Pakistan?
I returned back to Pakistan around 2005 when we had this horrific earthquake, which impacted, Pakistan in a very devastating fashion. And like many Pakistanis, we rushed back to assist in whatever we could. And so at first, you do what you can, and you work in the affected areas, etc. And then eventually, from voluntary work, I joined the United Nations. We were very involved in the recovery, reconstruction, restitution process. And as a result, I had an opportunity to start seeing parts of Pakistan which I hadn't seen. And that sort of triggered, like a curiosity about my own country. And many years later, when I was with the National Disaster Management Authority, NDMA, I had another set of opportunities to see other parts of Pakistan. So with my own curiosity, with my own background coming from KP and Balochistan, and the nature of the work that I engaged in while in Pakistan, I have had the opportunity to travel through 100 districts of Pakistan, and we have about 154 districts. So I've seen a lot of Pakistan. So the trigger actually initiated in the 2010 floods when I was in Sindh. This story is also in my book, Culinary Tales of Balochistan, where our culinary heritage is not visible in our public spaces. They remain hidden in our private spaces, like so many things of Pakistan. What we promote publicly of who we are, what is Pakistan, what is most Pakistani, we've narrowed down over the decades. We've done this to our own culinary heritage as well. Which Pakistani food do we claim to be Pakistani? If you look at our overseas Pakistanis, you would imagine that what is Pakistani is only Mughlai and Kashmiri Khana. I understand why, because that happens to be also the majority of who our diaspora represents. But even within Pakistan, our restaurants and dhabas, what do they serve? So when I realized this reality, and there's no documentation, like with so many things that we have erased in our minds, in our writing, this was also going to be erased. So Pakistan on a Plate is an attempt to document the undocumented and to make visible what is invisible through food.
That's a very interesting point, and I've heard you.
A very long answer to your question.
No, it's very legit, and I agree with you on so many levels. And I've seen and heard you making this point in a lot of your talks. But tell me, why is it important that
Please.
that history and that legacy should be documented and should be made part of our public identity? And why? What does it tell you when you see that it has not been, and it has always been, so a very private affair within our different communities?
To answer this question, you would have to begin with choosing that which lens do you want to look at. Pakistanis tend to look at everything through a political lens because we are perpetually in crisis. We are a young nation with an ancient history, and this tussle is, we have not found a way to manage this tension between modernity and tradition, with power politics and civilizational realities. So this stress is always viewed through a political lens. I have chosen to try and broaden, to hit something, to reach out to a people in crisis through something which they are comfortable with, which is our food.
Right.
And our food does not lie. So in this entire reality of fake news and manufactured identities, or prioritizing realities, or half truths, or some truth but not all the truth, if we look at our food, and if we were able to explore and honor and enjoy and express and own our parts of who we are and what we eat through food, I have a feeling it will have a very positive domino effect. So from purely a documentarian point of view, which culture, which country does not document its culinary heritage? So that in of itself, from a documentarian point of view, but actually also as a social scientist as well. What does food mapping tell us? We have not engaged in that activity either. Take your pick, why it's important.
Okay, fair. Tell me, then this book happens, and the Culinary Tales of Balochistan. What a wonderful, wonderful, yes, what a wonderful book, what a wonderful account of the various food traditions and culinary traditions of Balochistan. Thank you so much. Yeah, beautiful book. Thank you for compiling it, and it's so engaging. The best part is that it's done in a very engaging manner, with anecdotes, with little stories, and your personal takes and memories. So tell me, were you sort of documenting it over a period of time? Were you learning new things along the way? How did this book come together?
COVID. the minute we went into lockdown, we were unable to travel. So my last filming of a Pakistan on a Plate series was in Karachi, December 2019, and as you know, Pakistan went into lockdown March 2020. So a person like myself who can't really sit in one location for too long and having to completely go into isolation was a very difficult task for me. And so as a result, I realized that what could I do? So books were always going to happen. This was basically a sign from the powers that be that begin writing. So the 54 episodes came to an end naturally, if you call it as that, the book. And I started with Balochistan because both it's province, it was the largest all the most important. So for a variety of reasons, both personal, political, and culinarily and documentarily, I started with Balochistan.
Okay,
So
but
that's
that gives
how
me
we
hope.
that.
That gives me hope that there will be more episodes of Pakistan on a plate, and there will be more
Well,
books.
if someone funds me, if someone, I did, as you may know, that this was an endeavor I did completely myself. There was no interest, from public or private Pakistan or from the ministries, the culture, the private sector, the province. No one seems to find this an important or interesting or an area of research or worthy of support. So this work prevented me from actually doing anything else.
Right.
So I have to find a work-life balance, of course. The books I'm committed to, but let's see. The
Okay.
rest will have
Because
to happen when it happens.
yeah, this morning I was actually watching one of the episodes of yours from the Pakistan on a Plate series, and that was about the Parsi community and their
Yes.
culinary traditions. And it was so fascinating to learn so many new things, you know. It was such a great piece. And I think everybody should watch that particular episode, if nothing else, because it tells you so much about. And the sad part is that the community is actually, you know, sort of vanishing. It's dying
That's
out,
right.
and you know, very soon, you know, we will not have those people practicing the same food habits, you know. So it's important that you documented it while, you know, it is still being practiced. And I'm sure a lot of research and hard work went into it, because you got the right people to talk about it.
I mean, since you mentioned, the episode of the Zoroastrians of Pakistan, recently we lost Uncle Minu Marker, who was a very prominent businessman in Karachi, son of Quetta, Balochistan, and the loss of like the last elder of the Markers sort of closed the chapter. Of the markers of Balochistan, which was very deeply hurt and like tragic actually. And I had just met Uncle Minu Marker, talking about the book and talking about his own experiences of living in Quetta, etc., and his family, which I've captured in a couple of episodes actually, in Quetta and also in Karachi. As well, and then of course the Zoroastrian episode. But it really, hits home that if we don't start documenting all sorts of facets of of who we are and where we come from, we will lose it. And then the next generation, and this country is a very young country,
Mm,
so who is going to educate our young?
mm,
So it's very important in whichever lens you want to take,
true.
to please research and document for our future if we care about who we are as a nation.
Okay. Coming back to Balochistan particularly, you know, from somebody who's sitting in Karachi or Lahore or Islamabad, you would sort of do a very broad brushstroke and say this is Balochi. You know, people who are not exposed or have not traveled through Balochistan, but Balochistan itself is a kaleidoscope of different cultures and different
Absolutely.
you know, legacies and different ethnicities. So you have Pashtuns and you have Balochs, and then, you know, even a Parsi community,
Brahvi, yes,
yeah, Afghanis, and then Punjabi settlers, and so on.
and the
So
Brahvis, yeah,
and of course, so
Hazaras.
yeah, yeah. So how have you seen the different culinary you know, sort of nuances between those communities?
And the book captures on purpose and very conscientiously as many representative recipes of the diversity of Balochistan. So, Gwadar, which is the fishing community, they're of course Baloch, but they are a fishing community. So their entire ecosystem, which will completely, feed their culinary heritage would be very different, naturally, and how they respond to challenges of development and challenges of modernity will also reflect in their culinary tradition. Then, of course, we have what we call the Makranis, which have a different history, which were brought to this part of our coastal areas, and then have integrated into the larger Baloch identity. So that is also discussed, and then of course the northern part of Balochistan, which is primarily Pashtun dominated, their agriculture, their forested areas, their traditions of livestock, animal husbandry obviously creates an ecosystem of a certain kind of food traditions. Then as you go further south, it's much more arid, and animal husbandry changes, the topography changes. This is also the area of Mehergarh, which is the seat of the most ancient part of the entire subcontinent, 9,000 years, Neolithical settlements. So what did they create when man decided to first settle down? What did they grow? What did they bake? How did they do it without utensils? They had been invented. Then of course you have urban centers, like Pishin is the second largest town, Quetta, of course, being the capital, the hub of all these groupings of people would come. The Hazaras have been coming into from center Afghanistan over the centuries. You have settlers from Sindh, settlers from Punjab coming into Balochistan. Who are the Zikris? How are they different? Are they different? Do they have different? So I have tried who are the Brahvis, are they the same people? Do they have a different culture? I have attempted to capture as much of the diversity that is the home of, and who have called Balochistan their home. So it is as complex, as layered, and as diverse as any other part of, the world.
Right. Okay. So you talked about the challenges also, that the communities have faced over the years. Uh, Now, we know Balochistan as, the most impacted province or region of Pakistan when it comes to climate change, the drought, the scarcity of water is becoming acute. How do you think, factors such as those impact people's food security view
Of course.
and their culinary habits?
Gee, like with uh, like with everything in Pakistan, disproportionately, Balochistan is impacted negatively. Disproportionately. It is invisible in the mind, it is invisible in the development framework, it is invisible in terms of priorities, it is also the playground of conflicts initiated by others, both domestic and international. So this cumulatively has an impact on the people. Balochistan is also the most least populated of the largest province. So they have also been taken advantage of in terms of keeping them invisible, thinking that they are only 2 to 4%, and it's the playground for extractive politics, extractive economics, and then of course over the decades it has a multiplier effect. So as climate change has an impact in the entire region, from deforestation, from underdevelopment, from overpopulation, from lack of infrastructure development, lack of market access. I mean, you can't fly from Quetta to the Makran coast. You have to take a flight from Karachi.
Right.
The electrical grid for the entire Makran area comes from Iran. They are much more connected to Oman and Iran than they are, Pakistan. I mean, or Quetta. It's ridiculous. So these have a dramatic effect of once a very green and lush hub of seeds for the largest salads for the entire subcontinent. It is reduced to the sustenance and radars of Quetta.
Right.
So where having fresh greens and fresh salads is a fundamental part of local culinary culture, it's now become only possible for those who are able to kitchen garden or
Right.
in Quetta, so to speak. So, you have many developmental factors which have been actually altered, and impacted how one feels. And if you're looking at it from a non-culinary point of view, but a nutritional point of view, you will see those factors again feeding in, which again linked to poverty.
But
So,
we also know that that the communities across Balochistan, because of the severity of climate from ever, are very resilient, and we see a lot of traditions of preservation of food and pickles,
yes.
the pickling traditions, drying traditions. Tell us a little bit about that, because I'm sure along the way you have discovered those traditions as well.
I have described Balochistan as an ancient Central Asian culinary tradition, where parts of Turkey, Iran, like Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, or various parts of Central Asia have jumped into the 20th century. Um, if you reverse back, several hundred years, our food in Balochistan is a snapshot of that. So we are ancient, because of the developmental walk that we are in Balochistan. Our culinary traditions remain as ancient. So part of that is curing, or dehydrating food. So you're able to preserve it because you have no electricity, you have no refrigeration, and you need to extend the longevity of whatever nutrition that you do have,
Right.
for expensive items, which is like meat. And as a animal husbandry dominated culture, so sheep and goats, etc., are abound in many varieties of it. So in the winter months, in the northern part of Balochistan, Pishin being a particular area which is known for landi is made, which is curing lamb. But you also have curing of goat in the coastal area, which have exactly the same developmental challenge, but a different topical. And so they obviously can't cure it in the same way because it's boiling hot all year round over there. So they can't do lamb and it moves in cold weather, but they can cure it in a specific way with pomegranate powder, goat meat, associated with around Eid area, Eid time, where
Okay.
they are able to collectively buy and slaughter a goat, so also indicating socioeconomic conditions as well. We do the same thing with dairy products, krut, when we dehydrate a lassi kind of milk and then rehydrate it for a whole variety of recipes as an ingredient. And I share various good recipes. One particular one, ash, which many communities have, but I, for the book, have used a recipe of the Hazara community, representing a whole bunch of indicators. A poor man's food, one whole meal, like a whole meal, multiple meals in one, and each ingredient representing aspects of their socioeconomic conditions, which a reflection of Balochistan is there.
Interesting. And breads, you have talked.
Oh,
Yeah.
there are. I didn't realize how many varieties of breads Balochistan has, and the most fascinating recipe was kak, which I won't tell your audience, but if they read the Mehergarh chapter, I think they will be blown away.
Right. No, no, it's very fascinating, and who would think that, in Balochistan, which is not,
Amazing bread.
considered a wheat growing region per se, they will have so many different kinds of breads. And again, breads which have a longer shelf life in the natural environment. So that's
Fiji,
very
for sure.
fascinating. Okay, tell me a little bit about, food. Meals are considered a very communal activity. Communities get together. You can get guests to come
Tribal
in.
society eat that way.
Yeah, yeah, but we when we see whatever is available in public sphere, women are particularly missing from the landscape. In your journey and in your interaction with the communities, did you find out that women are actually very forceful, but in the background, or what was your finding?
Women in tribal societies, traditional societies, have very strict social codes in public environments. So, absolutely right, they are not visible in public spaces. But inside the house, absolutely. So, I mean, I ate and cooked and spoke to more women than men because they are the repositories of the culinary culture and heritage in the private spheres. All the cooking and all the public eateries or public dhabas or having tea outside, etc. That happens with men. Inside, it's with women. I, of course, in a family environment, I ate with both as well. Where that is giving me sort of the privilege of being a member of their family, where men and women are able to sit together because it is in sort of acceptable environment.
Situation, yeah.
So, but yes, I mean, tribal societies are very conservative, and women have very strict codes of conduct. But that applies outside the house, not inside the house. And they are the repositories of our culinary heritage. If you want to talk about uh, our food traditions, our agricultural patterns, which feeds into food, we speak to our elderly women,
Interesting.
not men.
Interesting, because you think of all the men sort of making sajis, or all the men sort of making bread,
Yes, yes, but that's
naans.
outside.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
the saji, because saji is done publicly outside. Yeah, landi is cured outside, and it's very large and heavy, etc. That's done outside. So rosh is made in very large quantities outside. Naan is baked in tandoor outside. So anything with an outside is men.
Right.
Everything that is inside, and the majority of our food traditions is women.
Okay. So tell me, Nilofer, is there anything for vegetarians in the cuisine from
Yes,
Balochistan?
of course. Let me be very, very clear. The majority of Pakistanis eat vegetarian khana, irrespective of which province. This is a misnomer because meat is expensive and we are a poor country. We don't need to be a poor country, but we are because of various reasons. So the majority of Pakistanis, their daily cuisine is vegetarian. And so, for example, carrots originated in Afghanistan. Spinach, which is also originated in Afghanistan and is widely available and grown all over northern, central, southern Balochistan. So, with modernity, lentils were introduced from Iran and from Karachi, etc. Otherwise, lentils didn't come, is not part of the natural habitat of Balochistan. So, and then all the salads, green salads, since the colonial periods, tomatoes, in Las Vegas, in fact, considered the best in the country as well. So there is enormous variety of vegetables, and they are eaten daily, in our households. But we consider them irrelevant. So we focus on the meat, that we associate wealth and privilege and the Mughals and the kingdoms and the court life is all meat. Even a poor man will serve his guest a piece of meat to give that person respect and honor, because that's part of tribal culture. So we assume we only eat meat. And also in the public eateries, of course, they sell rosh, kebabs, nandi, tikkas, chapati,
Ajis, yeah,
all
yeah.
varieties of fries, etc. Why meat, right? Because it's expensive. If you can afford it, then you can have it. But daily, no one eats every day outside, right? So there's a perception that everyone eats meat. It's not. It's completely inaccurate.
Right. Interesting. Interesting. Because you would think of the tribal communities and you would think, people, sort of rely more heavily on meat because they're not at
Oh,
one place and they're hunting and they're gathering food and taking it along as they're moving. But, meat is a vegetarian diets are more associated with societies which are more agricultural or, stationed at one place and, then they grow something from the land and then they consume it.
no, I mean, animal husbandry, they will slaughter meat if there's a guest, or if that particular animal has reached a certain peak of it's giving milk and close to like dying, and then they will slaughter it because they
Right.
need the animal for many other things as well.
Yeah.
So no, in fact, they will remain vegetarian as long as they can because they cannot afford it.
Right. Right. Okay, let's talk about desserts. Do we have desserts in
Ah,
Balochistan? Because मैंने नहीं देखी कुछ के typical Balochi desserts हो कोई या
right.
Balochistan desserts. Like you say, it's
Yeah,
not Balochi, it's Balochistani.
correct. Well, Balochistan is the fruit and nut basket of the country, in spite of no one investing. Once, when where from Quetta Airport all the way to Pishin to Qazi House, there were nothing but apple orchards. Now we unfortunately see nothing but brick kiln, smoke-filled towers. So we in the book I have several dessert recipes based on the ingredients that dominate Balochistan traditionally. Of course, now everything is like modern. You have all sorts of desserts available and halwa. So Gwadar has a very interesting halwa, which is in the book, Gwadari halwa, very funky halwa. And then, of course, modern Balochistan, from Quetta and several hundred miles left and right, we have a modern recipe called mastung cake, which has a
Okay.
very interesting story, which I will not reveal. You have to buy the book. And that has a very interesting story. So that those of us who come from Balochistan and from the northern central part of Balochistan will know what mastung cake is. So I tell you that story, of course. And then because we have dairy, right? You have natural sweet desserts associated with dairy products.
Right.
So that's another set of sweet traditions. So we have a whole variety and certain potential variety because we are the fruit basket and the nut basket of the country.
Okay. Okay. One very interesting point that just came to my mind, Nilofer, and I'm sure you are the best person to talk about that. That is, in other cultures, for example, in Punjab or in KP also, we see that the nobility has a certain cuisine, and then the common people or the peasants or people with less means have a certain cuisine. Is it the same in Balochistan or? is it more democratic because of it being a tribal society?
Well, you had in the book and in the episodes, I share Khan of Kalat, who ruled the area, for several centuries, and was the largest state of the area that we call Balochistan now. They have no special culinary traditions. So, unlike in other courtly kitchens, where I share, like in Bahawalpur state, for example, or, Khairpur,
Or the infamous Mughals?
or even Swat. Yes, or Mughals in general, we are more democratic in Balochistan, and this has, of course, to do with socio-economic conditions. And I give an explanation, which I will not share here.
Okay.
We, as I said, are an amalgamation of multiple civilizations in Balochistan, and so our traditions are linked with those, and so a lot of those traditions come from, Central Asia and Greater Afghanistan, etc. So we have no ancient privileging of recipes emanating from, the jams of Las Bela, or, or Kalat, or no.
Okay, interesting.
The so-called tribal heads, they were chieftains and powerful in terms of controlling land and, jirgas and, beartugs, but it did not have an effect on developing culinary traditions.
Okay, one question that a friend of mine actually wanted me to ask you is about these Quetta hotels that are everywhere. What is the story behind it? Is it really something that can trace its roots back to Quetta?
Well, the Quetta tea house, from what I understand, Balochistan, I have a chapter in the book called The Settlers of Balochistan. And this was an attempt to also bring to notice large-scale migration of the sons and daughters of Balochistan as a result of economic needs, conflict, and a whole variety of reasons. Where once, you had the Hazaras and various communities from Afghanistan and even Punjab coming to Balochistan to create opportunities for them. For several decades now in Balochistan, it has been the reverse. Many people are fleeing Balochistan. So as a result, in Karachi, we had a huge community of settlers who then developed.
Sorry, I've lost your voice. Yeah, sorry, I lost your voice in the middle. You were saying that, many settlers in Karachi who
Yes,
migrated.
Many settlers from Balochistan who settled in Karachi were obviously very keen to have their familiar, food and snacks and tea. And I talk about tea, and the variety of tea in Balochistan in the book. So naturally, they then created this sub dhabas in Karachi called the Quetta Tea House. So from Karachi, then the Quetta Tea House culture moved to Islamabad, and that's why you and I see a whole mushrooming of the Quetta Tea House, and then subsequently, they all divide different permutations of that name, because so many now Quetta walas are now in Islamabad for seeking better economic opportunity and, frankly, safety as well.
Yeah. Okay, that actually brings in my next point, and which is about, the flora and the fauna of Balochistan, because I know that there are herbs which are particular to Balochistan because of its topography and the variety of topography that it has. Are there any indigenous herbs that we don't know about which are used in the cooking in the kitchens across Balochistan, and which are distinct from what you have seen in the rest of the country or in the region? And would you tell us a little bit about those?
Uh, well, I don't know about exclusivity, but for example, many of the herbs that we associate with, Europe, uh, this actually also applies in Chitral as well, but also in Balochistan, where dill, chives, we call it in Pashtun gandana, which is a fundamental ingredient in our dumplings, and also we add it in ash. We also add it in, many other broths and soups. Now we associate this condiment with Europe, but
Yeah.
this is indigenous to Balochistan. Um, for example, kale, which is considered a superfood and very shishi and very expensive, etc. That is, very common in Balochistan. You can find it in all the radars. As I said, a lot of our salads, a whole variety of them, which we now have adopted this eating in our sort of healthy, upper middle class lifestyle. This is natural to Balochistan. As I said, the black carrot, which is the original indigenous carrot, which originates from Afghanistan, of course, grows also in Balochistan. Very common, in Balochistan as well. So, because we are a civilization closer to Central Asian eating patterns, it was much more fresher greens, raw vegetables, and cured meat when
Right.
available, and fish, on the coastal
Coastal
side.
life. Yeah.
So, also the condiments were salt, and a few herbs, and that's it. So it was no spices, because the spices come from South and East of
Yeah.
Indus,
Yeah.
down.
Yeah.
So the palate is very, like clean, lean, and fresh.
So, Nilofer, what's your hope from this amazing body of work that you have done through your videos and through the book now? What's next? Where do you want this to go?
Well, I began the writing of the second book, which will
Okay.
focus on KP and Greater KP, like the area which is larger than KP. And so that I would also like to be able to work in an area in Pakistan where we would explore more, on culinary, agriculture, food, or what we call food mapping, cultural preservation, heritage preservation. But let's see. I mean, I haven't seen this as a priority, but if there are people interested in this, I would love to collaborate and love to work with them, because it does get lonely doing it alone, and it's always more fun to do things in groups. But thus far, this is what I'm going to be focusing on.
Thank you so much, Nilofer. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us. And, good luck for the new book. And, already, like I said, thank you so much for putting an amazing, amazing book together with a lot of useful information. And it's very exciting. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.